Brilliant. Well, welcome to this seminar with Dr. Harvey Kwiyani. It's great to have you with us, Dr. Harvey. And Harvey's going to be talking today about the new initiative that he's starting this autumn in education and in providing courses that will help leaders and churches grow healthy and strong. And I'll leave him to introduce exactly what that's going to be. A few practical things to start with. If you need to leave the room rapidly because there are flames engulfing the building, then you can go straight out the back that way or out the front door where you came in. If you need toilets, they're through that door and straight ahead of you. Ladies down the corridor a bit. We are recording today's session so that those who couldn't be, because there's at least twice as many people emailed personally to say they would love to have been there today, but they couldn't make it. So I think probably if we had everybody here who wanted to be here, we'd probably have about 30 plus people. So we're recording it so that everybody can get access to the information and hopefully connect with this great initiative that Harvey's taking. Harvey, I've only known for a short while, but I've grown to love and respect him dearly. He's traveled all around Europe and America studying. He has been a lecturer at Hope University in the theology department. He now works for the Church Missionary Society and oversees other masters and PhD students. So he comes with a wealth of experience and knowledge, and we're very grateful that you're in the city, Harvey, and we're glad you're here. Would you like to come and introduce yourself in any other way that you'd like to?
Thank you. Really delighted to have this opportunity to share with you what we have been dreaming about over the past few months, actually years, about theological education, leadership development, ministry training in the city. I am Harvey Kwiyani, as he said. I come from Malawi, born and bred in Malawi in the context of a great revival. My dad is a pastor. He's been a pastor for almost 40 years, a church that he planted in the 80s. He still can't retire from it. We're trying our best to get him to retire. He doesn't want to. And there's a belief in our community that once you are a pastor, that job is for life. Pastors don't retire. That's what they say. I don't know how true that is, and that's part of my story. I'm passionate about, and this is partly because of where I'm coming from. I'm really passionate about leadership development for Christian ministry, and that includes theological education for church leaders. I'm grateful to Nick, Together for the Harvest, and the leaders in the city who have opened up this space with great hospitality to allow us to begin to have conversations about the Liverpool School of Theology. Where we are in this really is that we are at the very beginnings of our conversations, of our discernment of what God is doing in the city. And so part of the hope for us in this gathering today is that you will help us make a sense of what is it that's needed in the city. How can an initiative like this serve the city? That's really why we are here. We want to get feedback from you. What's the itch in your congregations? What are the issues that you're wrestling with in terms of leadership development, in terms of theological education and ministry training in your congregations? What's the itch, and how can an initiative like this help you scratch that itch? Let's move. We are in the context that is undeniably quite unique and strange when we talk about Christianity in Europe, Christianity in the UK, Christianity in the West as a whole. There is this thing that people are calling the quiet revival. I don't really know why they call it a quiet revival. I don't understand why it's quiet, but they call it a quiet revival. really what's happening is a lot of people, especially younger people, younger white men in most cases, are turning towards Christianity. They are showing up in churches and they are staying. They're not just passing through. There is something happening. We working in the academic world, we know that on university campuses, Christianity is becoming likable again. People are responding positively, warmly to Christianity in ways that they did not even 5 years ago. Right? So there is really something happening. People are coming to church. Christianity is beginning to grow again in ways that just a few years ago nobody expected possible. Now, that's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing. This Malawian knows that whenever there is a revival, you have to think about what's going to happen with the people who come to church. Whenever there is a revival, you have, as leaders in the city, as leaders in the country, we need to think about what happens with that growth, what happens with all the people who come to Christ in the context of the revival. And the key thing here for us in the conversation is, how do we disciple these new Christians? When we think about that, we realize that actually revivals need leaders. Growing up again in Malawi, it's quite clear, and this could be possibly true of all sub-Saharan Africa. The revivals that we have seen in the past 70 years, if I can use that, they have been so massive that it has been impossible for churches to train leaders at the same pace as the people who are joining the church. And of course, in the end, you pay for it. You end up with big congregations that do not have sufficiently trained leaders. And that affects the quality of everything that happens in those churches. And I do think that actually it's very important that we begin to think about that, we begin to talk about that in our cities in the UK today, because the revival that's happening around us really needs us to think about how do we disciple, how do we train new leaders. I'll try this one more time. Okay. Right. Now, while we are celebrating that people are coming back to church, we are also seeing the news ever so often about theological departments that are closing down, Bible colleges that are closing down. It's been the news for the past few years, especially this summer, right? Just recently, Spurgeon's College closed down after 169 years of training leaders in London. Formation College in Birmingham closed down, passed on their students to Morelands College down south. And here home in Liverpool, Liverpool Hope University, the department that I worked in for a good 5 years, is closing down their theology department. They will keep 2-3 people just to run some of the things, but not teaching theology anymore. Now, of course, if you know Liverpool Hope University, it's the ecumenical university in the UK. It's grounded in Christian history. It's a coming together of 2 Catholic colleges and 2 Anglican colleges to create Liverpool Hope. Theology was at the center of the university. I mean, if you physically go to Liverpool Hope University, you realize that their chapel is at the center of the chapel is the center of the university's life. And yet, theology department is closing down. That leaves us in the city with possibly one other place where people can study theology. That's Emmanuel Theological College. at the cathedral, and then other colleges that have remote access to the city, Westminster and a few other institutions. But going back to my earlier argument, in times of revival, you don't close your colleges. You open new colleges. Now, beneath all this is a conviction for me that goes beyond what's happening in the country. It goes beyond the closing down of colleges. And it's a suggestion that says we need theological education, ministry training, and really leadership development to happen in the congregations where those things belong. As we can see, the university model of theological education has become totally unsustainable in Europe. I mean, I don't know any theology department that's thriving well at the moment. We cannot continue to expect that the universities are going to train all the people that we need. We need to take that back to the congregation. We need to take that back to our people in our churches having access to these things: theological education, leadership development, ministry training. Now, leadership is a big issue. I mean, there's a common saying, I think from John Maxwell, that goes, everything rises and falls on leadership. I think there's some truth in that. But as I've argued, in times of revivals, you develop new leaders. Leadership is critical. But in addition to that, and especially what we see in the city and what we see in the country, is that the Christian demographics are changing rapidly, right? As recent as last year, there was a research that concluded that actually, while in the UK as a whole, 20-25% of the population are black, brown people from other parts of the world, within the church, that's a lot higher, pushing up to 40%. So, of course, if you are working in Christian ministry in the UK, chances are you will work with other people from other parts of the world. It's becoming impossible to avoid that. But also, when you engage in mission and evangelism in your cities, you will definitely have to speak with people from other parts of the world. The demographics have shifted. Can our leaders function in a context where the people they planted the church with are not the people who are showing up in their churches today? Right? It's common. So we again, I argue that actually we are really the first generation that has to think about these issues in the context of Europe. So we need to revamp our leadership training styles, resources, to match up with the demographics of the people that we're working with, right? And that's, again, the universities are not there anymore to help us with that work. It has to be us as church leaders in our cities. And then in addition to all that, there is the need to reimagine what does theology look like when the body of Christ around the world it comes in different cultural heritages and different this and different that, and yet we worship the same Christ, the body is one. How do we function together as the body of Christ around the world? And in the case of the UK, and this is quite important because the UK, I think, is unique in this regard. In the case of the UK, the global body of Christ is here. Right? Whether it's the Chinese Christians or the South Korean Christians or the African Christians, the Brazilian Christians, we're all here. The whole body is here. How do we work together as a global body? When I say this, I add that actually, if we can get this well in the UK, because we are ahead of many other countries in terms of multiculturalism in our society. The multiculturalism that you see here is different from the one you see in Germany, different from the ones you see in the United States. This is unique here. If we can get this right, it can become our gift again to the world. Yeah. Right? To say that we as Christians, as followers of Christ, as members of the body of Christ, can actually live together, worship together, and be theologically in conversations with our brothers and sisters who come from different cultures and therefore see things in the Bible that we don't see. Right? That we can have these conversations, and that at the end of the day, these conversations enrich all of us. That we see God better when we see God through the eyes of the others. That we understand God better. I mean, theology is faith-seeking understanding, right? That's the basic definition. But that faith-seeking understanding becomes more enriched if we have perspectives and insights from our brothers and sisters from around the world. So I think it's important for us to wrestle with this. Now, where we are at the moment, in the context of our conversation, we are experimenting with two things. We're experimenting with a basic introduction to theology for church members who probably will become deacons, will become your church elders. They need to know something about theology. They need to have at least a basic understanding. I was talking with a leader yesterday. She's been in the church. She's African. So she, as an African Christian, a Pentecostal African Christian, she has read the Bible many times over. But she looks at me, she says, yes, I know the individual stories of what's happening in the Bible. But I've never had a chance to actually think of it as a story that moves from one end to another with God's hand working through it. A leader, she's been in the church for a long time, and yet she cannot sit down and articulate really, apart from the stories, God did this through David, and God did this to that person, and God that did. Impossible. And so it becomes critical that we actually really make basic theological education for church members accessible. So that's one of the things that we're experimenting with. The details about this is that it happens in person every second Saturday beginning in October. And we meet at Temple of Praise, Liverpool Lighthouse. But the next one is a bit more fascinating in that it is geared towards leaders. This is for leaders asking the question, and these questions have come from around the country, have come from around Europe, really. People saying, how do we lead multicultural congregations? Or how do we lead in contexts where there's cultural diversity around us? So that's another experiment that we're doing. It's basically just an experiment. We want it's a response to a need, but as a start, we want to see what feedback we can get from that. And that's, I think that what I would want from us here in this room is to say, if we were to add one more experimental module that can serve us in our congregations here in Liverpool, what would it be? Right? So I invite you to think about that. If we were to, yes, we've talked about basic theology 101, theological education for church members. And we've talked about a leadership module, working with leaders, wrestling with multicultural church, intercultural church, all that stuff. But if we were to add one more thing, one more module that can save our congregations here in Liverpool, what would that be? That's the question that I would like us to think through together. Let me mention this before I sit down. Part of this work has led myself and my brother here, John Ross, to actually begin to experiment further with a church plant in the city. A church plant focused on the younger generation, the young people who are really at the heart of the revival. We've called it Jabula, rejoice. Jabula is a South African word for rejoice, and it's centered around joy, but its goal, its aim is really to speak joy to the city. And that's again, us experimenting with what can work in this city. What is God doing in this city today that we can join with? But I bring you back to the School of Theology conversation. What can something like this offer to the city that's going to meet the needs in your congregations? Can I stop there, let you think for a few minutes, and then we can have question and answers and further discussions if needed. Thank you. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you. When you start to get questions, can you repeat the question, please?
Okay, all right, yes, sure, we'll do that. Yes, Graham?
On Saturdays, what time are you looking at?
On Saturdays, we're looking at Saturday mornings. So somewhere between 9 and 12, or 9:30 and 12:30, or something like that. We know that Saturday afternoons are busy normally with football and many other things.
That's why I was asking.
So, yeah.
Anfield on a Saturday.
Yes. Yeah. So Saturday morning. So yeah, just a question of what time on Saturday? Saturday mornings. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a personal question.
Yes.
You mentioned some of the courses that will be holding in October. How shall we know how to register for it?
Yes.
And will it be possible for us to sponsor people to attend some
Yes.
courses?
Yes. Yeah, so how will people register? We have the flyers here, and they have a lot of information that will be needed. Actually, I can just... It will have a lot of information that's needed to register. And the question of can congregations sponsor their members? Yes, basically that's why we are here, right? The only way that this thing is going to work is if we work with congregations. The school has to be a school of theology for the city. And the congregations, the churches in the city have to own the school, so to speak. It's not coming from somebody who is coming from outside. It's the city's school of theology. It has to serve the city. So churches in the city have to own a bit of it, and yes, sponsor people, as many people as you can, really. And a congregation that has some basic theological understanding makes a big difference. We we need our congregations, we need our leaders to at least have just a basic understanding of how theology works. It's critical. So yes, sponsor members, registration is open. We have a few registrations already. Yeah. Let me take you back to my question though. If you were designing something like this, what would your churches be looking for? I had a chat with Graham earlier, and he was saying we need something that can actually speak to people at their level without the academic burden of having to do academic things and use academic language. And really, that's exactly why we are doing this. That's why I'm saying this has to be congregational based, and we can't, I mean, once we start to talk about this, people begin to say, who is accrediting this work? And that's a good question, but it's a tricky question. In that once you begin to talk about accreditation, everything about what you're trying to offer changes. On the one hand, of course, the universities will demand a lot of money, so you have to charge like a university. But for the students to get the papers from the universities, they have to meet the academic requirements of the university. It changes everything. You cannot do that. You have to have all these, you have to meet these requirements before you can enroll. Yes, there's a place for that. But really, possibly the experiment we are having in doing this is to say, does it make a difference if you actually make theology accessible as possible to the members of the church? There are many people who say, who've come back to me and said, the sermon enough once a week the sermon on its own is not enough for what we need in our spiritual lives. And I think there's some truth in that. So these people who have been in church for a long time, listen to numerous sermons, and yet still cannot, have a basic understanding of what is happening theologically in the story. It's those people that we are trying to reach and say, yes, it's good to listen to the sermons or the podcasts it's fine, but a basic theological understanding of the story, of what God is doing in the city, of what God is up to in your neighborhoods, all those things have to be brought down to the congregational level, such that your members in your churches begin to think theologically about their lives.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, Nick.
In answer to your question, which is what would churches need?
Yes.
My observation, working with many churches, is that the greatest need they have is helping them to try and figure out how to make disciples. And,
yes.
In my experience, growing leaders is a natural extension of making disciples, particularly when you have both a theology and a praxis of disciples making disciples. Because as soon as you move into disciple making, you're starting to become a leader.
Yes.
Might that be something else that you would consider as a course?
Well, yes, definitely.
Do you want to repeat the question?
Yes. Could we think of discipleship or disciple-making training as a course that can be offered to help churches around the city get to the issues of leadership in the right way around? Yes. I mean, again, thinking as an African, the possibility that people can follow Christ, even become leaders without proper discipleship doesn't really make sense to me. And so the ground layer of all this is, how do we disciple people to a place where they can begin to do what God has called them to do? And so you're moving disciples to begin to step into discipling others and becoming leaders in the process. So in my head, as I think about this, at the foundation of everything that we are doing, those two modules and every other module that comes, are two key things. Discipleship is critical, and mission. And those two things actually work together to move Christians along in the ministry to where God has called them to do. But, and so we don't teach anything that's not based on those two convictions. Make disciples who can make other disciples. And discipleship, for me, the way I easily define it is that story of Matthew 16, where Peter gets to hear the Father speaking, telling him he's Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, right? After 3 years, one of the disciples hears the Father. That's been the journey. That's been the journey of discipleship. And so, as we work with students, as we work with leaders around us, is really to bring the people who come to Christ to a place where they can hear what the Father is saying to them. Critical. And two, then, once they begin to hear the Father speak to them, the Father, God, the Spirit speak to them, it's going to draw them to begin to bring other people to Christ. Right? So that's the foundational pillars of everything we're doing. Help people make disciples, and help them train those disciples to make other disciples, with a focus on sharing the good news with the rest of the world. That's critical. Thank you. Esther?
I have a lot of suggestions. Maybe we can catch up a bit later on, but I've been on a bit of a journey myself personally.
Sure.
To discover purpose and calling, and I think what Nick is saying about that idea of, being discipled to the point where you kind of know what that specific calling is for you as a congregation member. There's a sense that the church might need something different from you than a congregation member on that journey. You talk a lot about missions as well. I think some of the things that I've been activated in are things like social justice and social action, stewardship, things that I didn't have words for until I've gone on that journey. So I certainly like the idea of a kind of what is your calling sort of theology.
Sure. Okay.
People will grow into it. But then there's so many different topics you could dive into within that. It's just knowing how specific to be. But something that's quite on my heart is workplace evangelism, business mission, sort of that, how to make it like practical, to help people and solve real world issues. I don't know if that's something that's too big for your course or just not yet, but that's certainly something that I'm really passionate about.
Yes, Esther asking about how broad is our sense of mission, so to speak. And all my training has been in missions, so I've spent many years thinking about this. And again, as an African, I wonder, some of the issues that come up in the West about missions are not even questions that we ask in other parts of the world. And that's one of the key things that I think that the model that we're doing, which allows the world Christians to speak to one another, makes possible conversations that you probably couldn't have anywhere else. Where I come from, mission and social justice are the same, right? And I'm speaking about integral mission at a conference in 2 weeks' time. I don't understand how mission cannot be integral, right? So all those things have to be unearthed and brought up in the conversations that we have as we really seek to have some impact in the city, to see what a citywide church, trained in these things, in missions, in discipleship, in these things, what impact would that make in that city? Right? So the global nature of the conversations that we will be having will open up to all these questions that we have in ways that we could not if it was just, for example, I teach around the country. The conversations that I have when I have a group of white British students and take the same topic, take the same questions to have a conversation with African students, it's going to be two totally different conversations. They will have different concerns, they will have different language, right? And now, I think what really excites me is when those two conversations are joined together. When you get the African and the British students in the same room and hear them have conversations among themselves about this. And really, that's what we're trying to do. Andrew?
I'm not a church leader, but just in response to you saying other potential courses you could do, I also don't know who you imagine is going on these courses, who you've got in your head is going to be on them. But I know in my church, sometimes I see young people who go through all the youth periods, and then you can see these are people that could go on and lead churches. Sure. But obviously they want to go to university and do whatever it is they want to do, and they may not want to do theology or whatever. But if you could almost offer a course that was targeted at young people who obviously had a church future. If any of these, you might say, well, these are actually perfect for them anyways, but if not, that might be something that would be really good, that you could direct, the church leaders could direct their young people to.
Yes, thank you. That's Andy asking about the possibilities of a course that's designed for young people who are sort of good enough to be considered for leadership in a church and often don't have access to places and courses that can help them with that process. There is the church plant is definitely focused towards young people, so that's at the back of our minds. But that would be a good module to add in. Spend a few weeks with young people, discerning their cause, discerning their gifts, and discipling them, and maybe pointing them towards the right places for further discipleship. So yeah, definitely, it would be good to think about that as we move forward. A course for young people.
How long does each module last?
So at this point in time in our thinking, as we are experimenting this, and I've had a few registrations already on the basic theology module, and that's basically people who have been in church for a long time. They want to spend some time with a systematic study of an introduction to theology. The leadership one, I have a few students, but the leadership one is going to be online. So they are in London, they are in Manchester, they are in other parts of the country. I've forgotten your question.
How long will it going to last?
Yes, so at this point in time, we are saying for the two that have already been created, because the goal is to have longer conversations with people. We're doing 3 modules for each of those courses, and a module is 6 meetings, 6 sessions. Yes, so, and those 6 are scattered for 3 months. So every 2 weeks we meet again. And so what we have now, we have October to December, we have January to March, and we have April, May to sort of end of academic year. But the good thing about this is that we can design this to be something that can be done in as short time as possible. right? We could design a module, for example, on youth work, right? And have it delivered in one term, in 6 sessions. Bam, done. And people could move on. So there is a lot of flexibility in how this would shape up once things take off. But for now, it's sort of 6 sessions in a term and 3 terms in a year. For the introduction to theology one, I do think that you need time with that. You need to get to know people. They need to get to know you. You need to introduce people to some materials that you can't do in a hurry. So that needs time. The same with the multicultural congregations one. There's, I think, a lot of reading to be done, a lot of conversations, a lot of models, a lot of examples to be looked at. So expand that 6 sessions per term for 3 terms, 18 sessions. But I'm talking to a friend in London who is designing a module on gratitude, a theology of gratitude. And that will definitely probably be a 1-term module. Right? So get people together 6 times, spend 18 hours together, and it's done. That's a module done. Others will need longer time, others need short time.
Another question for you.
Yes.
Liverpool is in Waversley,
Yes,
totally different area.
yes,
Even from Anfield in one sense.
yes,
So there's going to be some people who could afford this.
yes.
But there's going to be a lot of people who can't. So the only funding available.
2 ways I can answer that question. The first one is, yes, if there are people who need this but cannot afford it, get in touch, right? And then we can talk to others who can sponsor people to come. But second, and I think this is critical, is that in our thinking, this is our city's work, this is our congregation's work, right? So to some extent, the congregations have to also be a bit more responsible in helping those who can't to afford this. The only way this is going to work is if congregations back it. Because if congregations don't back it, it's as we are seeing, theological institutions are closing down, right? And so it's your church is saying, we have these members, let them come. Are there any members, any students who can't afford to pay? We can pay for 2-3 people or something like that. And priced at £150 per module for the introduction to theology one, and £300 for the multicultural leadership one. £150 per module for 18 hours of teaching. That's less than £10 per hour of teaching, right?
The problem is some of our guys where they're coming from, they've come from like being massive drug dealers, they know about money. But now they're not incomes because they can't work illegally.
Yes.
That's all they've ever known. Their record is like,
Yes.
they're not going to get a job.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Or it's going to take a while for
Yeah.
the trust to get a job.
Sure. Sure.
And there'll be some people who can afford it, who are going, yeah, I want to invest into them as leaders.
Sure.
But then, and then you've got your others who are coming from that background, you think they're equally important, so I don't want to invest into them. So it's that. It's just my experience that people I'm
Yes.
with.
Yeah. Let them get in touch.
Yeah.
Let us know. If they cannot afford it, we will have to figure out how to get it to them. He has not said a word.
So the question I want to ask based on what you said at the point, does that mean that it's going to be based on the recommendation from the church, or if an individual not being recommended by the church cannot go through and apply for the programs?
No, and anybody can. It doesn't need a recommendation from the church. But for this to run well, to be sustainable, we need the churches to support what we're doing. That's what I'm saying. So, of course, if churches send students, that works even much better. Right? But that's not a requirement. Any member of any church can apply to come and study.
No, by recommendation.
No.
Because like me, I heard about this program just yesterday night.
Okay.
Around what time? Around 8 o'clock. Through the group that I belong to.
Sure.
The Pastors Fellowship of Baptist.
Sure.
So I saw it on the platform there.
Sure.
So I made it like just click on the link.
Sure.
And I see something that it won't be a waste of time just to improve my theology.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
And I put in for.
Sure.
That was just the information that I had about. So coming to this place and then listening about, I see something I can at least. It's not something that's going to be difficult for me to put in it. So when I'm hearing this, is it going to be so based on recommendation from the church?
No. It doesn't need that.
I was going to just ask, obviously, there are many different types of churches out there. Each one's going to have a slightly different focus, a different tradition. Theology is going to be useful for anyone, but is there a sense that certain churches need something different compared to different ones? Is that something that you're still gathering information about? In terms of, like, say, a more formal, structured service versus a non-denominational church, that sort of thing. Have you seen much difference in the needs of different churches?
No.
For leaders?
Yeah. How do we, and this is a question from Esther, and she's asking, how do we plan to wrestle with theological differences and different ecclesial practices in denominations and congregations around the city in our training? Good question. And really, I've not thought about that. And I've not thought about that because the conversations I'm envisaging, the conversations I'm having with people, look at theological differences as a strength that brings something in the conversations that you would not do if everybody was thinking the same. By saying that we want this to reflect the global nature of the body of Christ, really we mean the theological cultural differences that come into our conversations because we are engaging people from different parts of the world.
I think I was going to say, Harvey, even the nature of what a leader is in some churches, from a more formal structure, you mentioned elders, some churches will have a ministry lead who's someone who's almost been apprenticed in the church.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering how that fits together.
I don't know, I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great conversation.
Yes, Ma.
So just to chip in a bit to what Mr. Raised, I suppose the whole idea is for people to listen to one another and to sort of grow together and learn together. People who will be coming in for this training will, even when they're leaders, they will have an open mind.
Yeah.
The whole purpose will be defeated when the minds of people are closed and they're not willing to learn and to grow. Obviously, there will be fundamental differences, as many denominations, even the mainline denominations, not to talk Pentecostals. So, but there will be mutual respect and opportunity to learn, which I believe, and maybe wrong, is the whole idea, to continue to engage in conversations, even in differences, and to grow through that.
I think what I'm trying to get at is in some of the non-denominational churches that I've seen, a leader could be like the leader of the worship team, but that's a theology of worship. There's obviously internal ministries and external missions, and that's a whole theology itself. So every sort of area within a church structure is sometimes separated into a different kind of theology of that specific area. But then there will be other churches, maybe in the Catholic or the Anglican tradition, where it's more they need a leader who is the person on the pulpit who's, giving a Bible exposition. So it's just different church traditions are going to have different sorts of leaders within them, I think is just what I'm asking.
Nick, you can help me?
They are great questions, and I think what Harvey is offering here is something that's going to transcend different types of leaders in different types of contexts. I think the principles are going to be universal, and then each person will have the joy of applying that to their own local context. That's how I imagine it's going to work.
Thank you. That's it. And thank you for your question, man. That you really got it. Yeah, really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. I'll pick up the youth module. I'll pick up the discipleship module. We need to rethink that. We need to make it surface a little more. Well, there's a commitment to have that in everything we do, but to surface it in ways that it's clearly visible. The same with mission. How do we offer theological education to ex-drug dealers, for example, right? That's something that we need to think about creatively and find ways to make that happen. Some of the key things that I take from this. John, Matthew, you haven't said a word.
Just listening. Lots of the questions are being asked and answered, so.
Thank you. Any other comments before I sit down?
It's very exciting, and we wish you well with your endeavours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you very much, Harvey. It's exciting and inspiring. I wonder if, in a moment, one or two people could pray for this venture. I'm sure Harvey would appreciate that. But before we do that, one final practical thing from my point of view, and then I'll turn the recording off, which is that I'm making an assumption that everyone who's come here today or who's registered for this today would be happy for me to pass their name and their email address on to Dr. Harvey so he can continue the communication on a personal level. If you're not happy with that, then please let me know. Okay. So, thank you very much for coming.